Welcome to ChariTea and Biscuits, a series of open and honest conversations with those who work in and with the charity sector. Emma, Willder and guests will discuss the issues affecting small UK charities, highlight great resources and welcome listeners to a wider community of people in the know. Hit the subscribe button now and stay tuned for real behind-the-scenes chat.
So welcome to this edition of ChariTea and Biscuits. I'm joined today by David Allen, who is the CEO of Skylight Circus Arts. Thanks for joining me today, David. Would you like to explain to everyone a bit about Skylight Circus?
Sure, yeah. We are a small charity. We're born and bred in Rochester, and we specialise in providing circus skill workshops, classes and performance opportunities for anybody and everybody regardless of ability. We've been around for about 30 years, lots of ebb and flow in terms of our size, but at the minute we're a team of about 8 people in total, largely a freelance team. And we mainly do our work in Rochdale, but we do work around Greater Manchester and the Northwest as well.
And you've not been with the charity all that long, have you, David? Is it around 18 months or so?
Yeah, just coming up for that, yeah. It's
so
been a lively ride in that time.
I can imagine. And did you work in the charity sector before joining Skylight?
I did some work, but only on a kind of sort of freelance and consultancy basis. So prior to Skylight, I spent a couple of years around Rochdale and a little bit of work in Manchester, doing varied projects, some doing consultation work around public spending and projects in Rochdale Town Centre. I took a small play about child criminal exploitation around schools, community groups and special interest groups around mainly Rochdale and bits of Manchester, and did some evaluation and facilitation around that. I worked on things like Dippy when he came to the Northwest. I worked on kind of one of the shows that was created around that, and that was kind of a Dog's Body type role, painting sets and things, and a little bit of setting up production stuff, and then sort of looked into a producer role on that as well. And that was the last thing I did before I took on this role at Skylight, because prior to that I was in a much more commercial environment, working for people like MTV, Sega, Universal Music.
So what's your impression been of working in a small arts charity?
It's been a real culture shock. I have worked for these big organisations, but I've worked for them in small teams, sometimes trying to develop new things, so not massively resourced, but I am, as I'm sure will be very familiar to many people that will watch this or participate in these sorts of chats, I wear many hats, and the whole of the team do. So one day I might be talking to you about our finances and planning for year end and beyond, looking at issues around funding. I might be speaking to the Arts Council, the strategy meeting around investment in Rochdale, but then I might go from that to be putting up a sign in the foyer with our new logo on, or as was recently, rushing out to buy a kettle because ours blew up.
Oh my word! I think
there's no.
Can't cope without a kettle. Everyone needs to be able to have a brew.
Exactly. That was a non-negotiable task that needs to be done, really. That and the milk. There's always milk that's required in the fridge, because you can't run any organisation without a brew, can you? So,
you can't, especially if you're based in the north. You have to have a brew.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think a lot of people.
So it's changed.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people who watch this will be really familiar with that, wearing many hats. I know from my own experience where I used to work that I could one day be doing the finance strategy, and the next day I'd be moving a meeting room around to get ready, or I'd be setting up a laptop or dealing with the photocopier had blocked, and I'd have my hands deep in the photocopier. So you're definitely not alone in that.
Oh yeah, I've buried that memory. I think our printer's just gone bust. I was into that on I think Saturday morning, just before going out to do a show at Rochdale Folk Festival with all our team and participants, trying to get bits of evaluation printed out, and our printer has died. And as I'm sure you know, that's a messy job.
It is. So what do you think's been your biggest challenge coming into this role, and indeed for Skylight itself?
I think the biggest challenge for me personally has been adapting to a new culture and having to change the way I structure my work. There are things that I want to do around development, strategic kind of work, but as I say, there are certain things when there's a building involved and participants involved that have to come first, regardless. So things can get really knocked out of whack. And it's coming to the understanding that you may have a timeline or a milestone in your mind, but that has to be flexible, and perhaps learning not to beat myself up about that, because you're unable to do things as quick as you might do in a team that has better resources or more let's say horizontally vertically developed systems of structure. I.e. more people, basically. So that's been a challenge for me. And then personally, actually, also, finance has been a challenge, which I know you're well aware of, because I'm used to having a phalanx of management accountants to answer queries or prompt invoices being created and chased up and being placed in the right places, and to provide management reports on how we're doing against targets. And now that comes down to me, generally. And that, so having to learn that little bit more technical knowledge of how things work in terms of putting accounts and management reports together, that was a big time soak for me in the early part of my time at Skylight. For Skylight, the biggest challenge in my time has been is COVID, a massive change, massive impact on us as an organisation, as I'm sure everyone else has had felt the impact of that. Circus skills is something that we do, and it's about personal interaction and relationships, and a large part of it as well is about physicality. We do classes for anybody that wants to do circus skills just for the sake of doing circus skills. They're interested in it and they're interested in the art form, but we do them because they also provide relief to people, and it also helps with developing motor skills for people that might have physical disabilities, and they're things that don't translate very well to Zoom. We did do that, and we did manage to continue to support people throughout the pandemic, but it's just not quite the same, is it, to have that relationship with somebody trying to teach you to do something physically, and not to be able to have the kit to do it as well. So that's been a massive challenge, and of course that's had an impact on funding, both in terms of our funding from participation, people paying subs for classes and things, our bookings for outreach work. But also, if you can't run a project, you can't get funding for a project, and that's been a difficult time, I think, which will be recognised by most listening to this, I think.
And in terms of funding, I suspect you're like many of our clients, where it is that continual funding juggle, I like to call it. So you're very funder dependent in a way, and that's just the way that sometimes the charity sector and charity sector organisations have been set up. So it's juggling the needs of the funder with the needs of your organisation and how you further that charitable object.
Absolutely. So again, that's a massive change for me personally, but it's something the team are adept at. But I'm used to having one or two commercial drivers, if you like. Maybe it's one or two big clients around partnership spending, or maybe it's around customer spending. But they're sort of three things, or two, three things that are easy to sort of juggle. Big elements, big building blocks, and you are usually you're doing an activity, a commercial activity with the objective that fits that particular person. But you might need to knit different people's funds together, which makes it complex in terms of the back end of managing how we report to those. But also you become beholden to other people's objectives, and sometimes you're changing the work that you do. And normally the biggest impact is really on evaluation and how we report on objectives. It'd be nice to just have one kind of evaluation that you could do, and that fit all funders. And that's not the case. But we are doing things to mitigate that. Yeah, as you know, looking at our funders and our restricted funds, we have lots of smaller funders that have different requirements that feed into an overall project. But what I've tried to do is to focus more on bigger applications with funders that have objectives that more closely meet our objectives as an organisation. And there are many people that provide funds that kind of sort of fit into the subset of what we do, but it's the specific application of what they're looking for that we sometimes find difficult. So I'm happy to say that this year we've managed to focus on a few bigger funders, and I think that'll make life a lot easier for us in terms of managing those projects, but also reporting those projects, and the finances will be easier as well.
Definitely, because I think when you have multiple funders for one project and they've each got different funding requirements, people underestimate the amount of time it takes to just do the reporting on that, never mind actually delivering the project. It's disproportionate, and a lot of that isn't always built in when people are writing the funding bids. They don't necessarily build in all the time to do the assessments or the time that we need from somebody who's doing finance to actually make sure everything's coded to the right funder. It's those things that you're so concentrated on the project itself and the actual direct deliverables, you sometimes forget the indirect costs of what you're doing.
Yeah, so I did quite a lot of evaluation and consultation in the 2 years prior to starting at Skylight. But even I forget, and actually we have a funding development manager, and it's her that's reminding me that we need to allow for that time and actually do that work. So I've got into that sort of habit of right, we got the money, let's do the project. Great, the project went really well. Oh, right, now I've got to write a report about it. Well, where's the data? Well, you didn't collect it because you forgot to do it. But luckily, we've got people that are well familiar with that game and ensure that we capture it. But it's still a job of work. And it's actually, in some ways, we are a creative organisation and we're creative people. Sort of, I count myself in that a little bit, but it's sometimes those evaluation things that don't necessarily fit with how we think as people or how we run as an organisation. So we have to build things in that adjust additional work. But that's what we have to do. We appreciate you have to prove value for money. We're not saying that we don't want to do that, but it would be nice if we could kind of sort of simplify that. I think we are going to do that this year, hopefully. The other thing we've done as well is to mitigate that is we've managed to build some more partnerships with people that have funds from larger providers in the borough and want to do work. So we're getting some commissions or getting more outreach bookings. So we're doing the same work, but we're doing them for clients that don't necessarily need reporting for us to do, or at least if it is, it's basic. So we've kind of managed to sort of slide away from that, replace some of the smaller fund providers and grant makers by having clients that don't necessarily need that evaluation from us.
That's great as well, working in partnerships in your local area, because actually it's through working in those partnerships you can access the bigger funders and get the bigger pots of money, which essentially have less transaction costs in a way.
Yeah, exactly. There's quite a nice ecology in Rochdale, because it is quite a small town, although it's in terms of towns it's one of the biggest towns in the UK, but in terms of metropolis, it's quite small in terms of the number of organisations, the people that work in the sectors that we work in. And we have those connections on a daily basis, and we know who we can work with, and they know they can work with us. So if you have a particular project that has a requirement, you generally know who to go to, and those relationships form and are repeated over time. I think that would be different for somebody working in. Even just in Manchester, it's a much bigger pond, if you like, and it's maybe bit more difficult to navigate those things and maintain those relationships on an ongoing basis. But we're all quite supportive of each other in that respect in Rochdale.
I think what's really important as well is a lot of the time charities competing for the same pots of money in the same area. So if you can work with an organisation funders tend to like that. They like organisations working with each other, not competing with the same pots of fund. So no, it's really good.
So we have something called the Rochdale Borough Culture Network, of which Skylight Circus is an anchor organisation, and that's there to sort of promote arts and culture in the borough, from a quality but also participatory aspect and engagement. And the other organisations in that are Touchstones and Your Trust, who are mainly a gallery.
I know Touchstones from where I used to work.
Oh, of course, yeah. And then they've got M6 Theatre, we have Cartwheel Arts as well, who have, there's participatory visual arts. So we've all got a slightly different skill set, but we've all come from the same raison d'etre. It's all about participation and community involvement. So there's a shared rationale there that's in our practice, but we complement each other in our art forms. And it's a relatively new thing, I think. It's probably, if I say that, it's probably 4 or 5 years old, but even we've all gone through the MPO process recently, and we got together to think about how we could create a larger sum from our parts, so we could be seen to be a good provider of arts and culture engagement opportunities within the borough that complemented each other rather than people competing for the same pot. And that was really useful because we were able to construct some activities or plans around investment principles that were spread across all of us and were cohesive, and it'll lead to more work, I think, more projects that we put together and through joint funding or being commissioned to do something by another organisation. So, for example, we just won some money from the Arts Council. I say just, I think it was in March. No, it was April. We've already done the first round of it. We did a show for Rochdale Folk Festival last week, and I've just realised that I've been remiss in not mentioning them, because the English Folk Expo, who run that, they're an MPO that are based in Rochdale and part of the Culture Network. So we went in to do some work with them to strengthen their project. And then the second part of this project will be in Furnish Park in August with the community trust that runs that park, and we wrote in Cartwheel Arts to make our show a little bit more engaging with more activities. So there's a bigger sort of family offer for people on the day.
Sounds really interesting. So what's coming up for Skylight Circus then in the next year or so?
Ooh, well, first of all is year end. Got to get that done.
We'll get it done. We'll get it done.
Well, the big thing will be, I think, that show. Because that brings together everything we've discussed around artistic ambition in the past year and 18 months since I've been there, an increase in community participation, and perhaps some CPD around our professional performers, bringing in some people of genuine note from the sector to work with us on creating this show, and then creating this event that's a free mini festival of circus, if you like, in the borough, which we'll hope will grow from strength to strength over the next few years. So that seems like quite a big hurdle. We've just rebranded as well, so we're rolling that out.
I love it.
Rebranded. So that I said earlier about things taking longer. I think I briefed that in August last year, and I thought I'd get it done by September, because I've done that. That's my background is marketing and branding, and I've done that in other organisations. But we launched it on April the 1st this year. Probably not the best time to do it, but it's the only time we could get it done. So that just, that speaks to how things that aren't particularly key to the day-to-day and making things happen slip back. So we're rolling that out, and then we'll mark it now that people are coming out of the pandemic slumber. We're hoping we'll get to be able to increase things like our classes take up, and we're developing our education strand as well. So we do a lot of ad hoc work bookings with schools, you might expect. We're now going to develop that into a bigger, more saleable offer, I think, to education teams within councils. And we've got a project called Train the Trainer through Rochdale Borough Council Education Team, where we are training primary school teachers to then train other primary school teachers to then train young children in school to do to do circus arts as part of their PT or just social activities. And we'll hope to expand that. And then it's just that sort of the ongoing day-to-day job of trying to improve our operations. We'll be recruiting, fingers crossed. We've just won some money from Henry Smith Charity, which we're very grateful for, because that's core funding, the holy grail of core funding.
Holy grail, core funding.
Thank God. So we can turn the lights on now and everything in the building. So we'll be recruiting for an arts administrator, which will help, I think, free up some of our time to be a bit more creative and a bit more strategic. It'd be great to be able to have some of our creative directors' time to think about the future more than we'll be able to do at the moment. And also just to sort of streamline things. The idea is that we'll have somebody that will come in and take off some of the admin from the delivery team, which means that those people who are paid to do delivery are doing delivery. And not planning that delivery around booking forms or evaluation, etc., etc. So that feels like quite a big thing, I think. And we're also we are trying to recruit for our board. So anybody out there who's interested, we're looking for more trustees, particularly around grassroots activity, fundraising. I'm sure we all are. And we are reigniting our sort of pathways for, let's say, those with elite skills in circus, people who are doing circus activities because they're interested in working in the creative industry. So we've done some work with Kickstart employees in the past, I guess, 9 months, and we've taken them onto some pathways into other work beyond the Kickstart programme. To run particular programs. We've got one called Circus Rainbow, which is around inclusion for LGBTQIA+ teens, and one of our Kickstart trainees will graduate onto running that. But we've also started to bring some of our volunteers through, our younger volunteers through, onto paid positions, and we'll start to hopefully recruit more freelance workers to widen our pot. And hopefully creates, the next generation of circus trainers for Rochdale and the Northwest. And I think that's probably enough to be going on with for the next year. Oh, I forgot the big one. Yeah, MPO. I mentioned, so MPO we'll find out in October. It will be a game changer for us if we could get that. We were regular funded organisation back in the day. I'm sure some of the people watching this will remember those good old days when funding was just there to be soaked up. But there's investment in Rochdale coming in across the board through, we are a priority place and a level up place for the government. So there's investment coming in from that perspective, and we're hoping that that will help us with our MPO application, being successful with that. But if not, at least we've got a blueprint for working, and there is other investment coming in through places like the NLHF, who've invested in things like the town hall. We've also just won as a borough some funding to redevelop a cultural zone.
Yes, one of my other clients is involved in that. So the Rochdale Pioneers Museum. Excellent,
yeah. So I need to give a shout out to Darren Grice for that. Darren Grice is the Director of Culture. I think that's the right term. And obviously it's not just down to Darren, but Darren is quite forward thinking in terms of investment and hard working in trying to get investment in the borough and outside the borough into arts and culture as a force for good. And we've got people working together. You might not necessarily get working together across the board in different parts of the council. People like the Development Agency are investing in these things because we've seen in some ways, because of the impact of Dippy, what arts and culture can do for the communities around Rochdale in providing opportunities and actually just engagement and well-being. So it's exciting times in Rochdale, and we're right at the forefront of that.
Well, that's great to hear, David. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. And that's it really. So thank you for listening to this episode of ChariTea and Biscuits. The next one will be here shortly.